And we're looking for the path here. And we're looking for this path, and we look at alcohol and drugs in the center, and we start to think about what's keeping them in this cycle that they're going through. As a Native person, when you have alcohol and drugs, and you get into that, some of them, you can see that the balance is gone from them. And the balance, when it's gone, they will usually deal with that in anger or fear. Excuse me, I'm really nervous. Do you have something to drink? I'm not. I think or so. When we're talking from a Native point of view, we're talking about true balance. Of course, we use the 4 directions. And if all of these are in a balance, like the gentleman was just saying, you have those people that, so to speak, have it all together. I don't know how many of those there are, but they have the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the mental. And what's in their center? He was talking about the spirit. When we talk about a person's center, if that person doesn't even know what their center is, they're not going to be able to find that balance. They're not going to know where it's at. That alcohol is their coping skill. Rather than deal with their anger or deal with abuse or whatever it is they're dealing with, they're going to use alcohol to hide in, and that's going to be their safe place. For those people who have those coping skills automatically come in. For an alcoholic, alcohol is their first thing they're going to reach for when they cannot handle life. Some people, our work is our coping skill. When we get into issues, we work. Some of us are workaholics. I know a few. There's one in the room that helped me out at my in my breakout session. That's how we get controlled in our lives. Well, for an alcoholic, the alcohol is how they get control, because when they're drunk, if any of you have ever been into alcohol, you have the world. When you're high, when you're drunk, whatever, you have everything in control, or so you think. For us as VR people, we're trying to help them. And if we don't understand the situation that we're dealing with, how are we going to help somebody who is in alcohol and drugs and goes around the gambit and goes across and keeps coming back? The secondary for most Native American, 85% of Native people have PTSD. You don't have to go to the Army to get PTSD. You can get that wherever you're at. And if you're a Native American, 85% chance you probably have it because of historical trauma, because of the abuse, because of alcohol, because your parents could not handle the boarding excuse thing, and they pass it on down by their own fear and their terror or whatever it is they couldn't deal with. When you have PTSD, the major sign for PTSD is anxiety. How many have had an anxiety attack? Not too many of us? Okay. When an anxiety attack happens, it's when I first had mine, when I started to get flashbacks from boarding school and had to deal with those things, my anxiety attacks, I thought I was having a heart attack. And I went to the hospital like 5 times. And of course, the doctors found nothing wrong, so they sent me home. So the next anxiety attack, went back to the hospital, kept going back and forth. Nobody knew what was going on. Not until did I get into VR before I found out what the thing was that I was having to deal with that nobody knew. Alcohol doesn't involve just the person. We in VR see that it involves the family, it involves the job, it involves the community. The community can be as much of a hindrance as alcohol. Because if that person, sometimes all you have to do is say a person's name, the whole community knows who you're talking about, and they're not going to make it, so let's not even try to help. Or they're from some tribe, as soon as you hear that tribe, they're not going to make it because we already know what those people. And so we can get into a situation where we as VR need to be careful where we're judging. We're looking for the balance. We're looking for that individual. We're trying to find that place. I asked somebody to come up and share. She was the one that I did took her to the board. When I take somebody to the board, I ask them what their disability is. I do mapping, and I invented this myself. My boss asked me to come and do it last time, and I did it, and I took Lorna to the board. So I'd like her to share that experience with you.
So, Wilma really kind of stepped through like what are the issues and the things that I deal with, and for myself, I have headaches. I have some pretty extreme headaches. Never completely without them, and so in going through that, she really kind of does a very detailed assessment and with you of being able to kind of chart and have that discussion of, well, what caused those headaches? When do those headaches get worse? You know, and for me, I think, you know, there are a lot of different issues. I had some medical issues, and then in 2008 I was assaulted, and that really kind of spiked those issues. And so in really kind of bringing those things out and having that discussion. And so for me, it was a very enlightening way to explore and figuring out what are the things that really trigger it for me, and being more aware of that. And so helping me explore that it wasn't so in your face, and helping me find the answers to those questions without somebody leaning and saying, do you realize that's what happened, and things like that. And I think, you know, really bringing that about. So.
And Lorna agreed to do that with me, and my former boss, Wade McGee, also helped me do it in another presentation, and I also have one on PTSD. When you take someone through those situations, you find out when this problem happens, when did they start, what happens in it. And you can take that person to the board, and when you get done with that board, you have their whole life mapped there. Now, a person, when they're sitting there and they're just talking to you, they can forget as soon as they walk out the door. But when I let that client go, I take a picture of the board and I give it to them, and I also put a copy in their file. That board will show them what they're dealing with, the issues that they're having to deal with. They get to look at their life in a small point. When you're looking at your life, it's a little bit harder to deny or not deal with than it is if you are hiding. And if you're hiding in alcohol or whatever it is you're hiding from, you can hide there forever. You can hide there for a long time. One of those issues that I came to was, when I first got to VR, they said that we provided traditional services. And so I asked them, what do you mean by traditional services? They had no idea. So I had to make up the traditional services. And that's the second part of the take them to the board is, for your program, you need to set up those traditional services if you haven't already. You need to be able to hand those people a paper so that when they walk out the door, they haven't said, oh yeah, I'll do that one of these days. No. Take that paper home with you, decide who you want to deal with, come back, let's sit down, let's talk, let's map it out, what you're going to do for your traditional services. And this is, when you come into this area, some people don't even know who their contacts are on the reservation. A brand new counselor that comes in is not going to know who the elders are in that community. It's not going to know who they should contact for an individual person and what that person needs. Because what is good for one person is not going to be good for another person. What is good for one tribe is not going to be good for another tribe. As a Coeur d'Alene tribal member, I do things one way. As a flathead, my brothers and them do things a totally different way. We give each other that allowance to not, you have to do it my way. Because our clients, none of them are the same. Every person is an individual. I'm trying to speed up here because I know we went over time. As a counselor, how do you do this? How is it delivered? Who's the person who needs to provide for the individual client? If you're providing traditional services, that's not your job. Your job is to get the person who's going to provide those traditional services. As counselors in Native country, and our ability to tap into our own traditional services and how that can be used and utilized in the counseling services, that's what our job is. Traditions, the handing down of customs, practices, doctrines, something taught to pass on to the younger generation. Okay, that's the white man's version of traditional services. I went to the dictionary to find this definition. So I found out what tribes, predominant tribes are in my area. The Coeur d'Alene, the Kalispel, the Flathead, Spokane, and Caldwell. So I found the traditional people on my reservation from those tribes. And I went to the elders, and one thing about the elders, if I go up to an elder and I say, what do you think of his traditional services? The first thing he's going to say is, wait, are you writing this down? I don't want anybody to think that I know everything. So at first he's not going to even want to talk to me about it. And so each elder was given an example of what the program needs. And of course each elder was reluctant to share and to presume to be the one saying it. So I assured them that for one thing, I'm not going to tell anybody what your name is. I'm not going to tell them, put your name on there, nobody's going to know. All I'm going to say is, this is a Flathead's description, this is a Coeur d'Alene, this is a Caldwell's, whatever. So I made up these titles on the side here, sweats, who are the healers, who are the herbs that we deal with in our community, spiritual guidance, lawgivers, elders. Each one of these sets, you need to have a definition for it. If someone comes up to you and asks you what one of these issues are, and you don't even know what it is, how are you going to help them in traditional services? As Native people, we're not the same. And the one tribe may believe something totally different. There's different religions on our reservation. There's 17 churches. And that does not even include the ones who do not have churches, but the sweat lodge is their church. You know, you have to be able, number one, it's not our job to judge. It's not our job to say, this is what I believe, so you have to believe it too. Our job is to let that client, we give them informed choice, they take that informed choice and they use that to help them in their own way of healing or whatever. Okay, I put their names up here, but I don't let anybody see this list of names unless it's the client that's asking for traditional services. So I would not give this to another program. I would not give this to an elder that didn't need it. I went to these elders and I said, okay, somebody wants to go to the sweat lodge. Who would you say is a trusted person that you would send someone to go to the sweat lodge? And then I would ask the next elder,